Warriors and Valkyries, welcome to our Hall of Norse Tales. Before we embark on our journey through the fjords of imagination, don't forget to join our tribe. Ring the notification bell, raise your axes by giving a like, and leave in the comments which realm you're watching from. Now settle close to the hearth, for our saga is about to begin. In the peaceful coastal village of Kattegat, where the sea met the sky in an endless embrace, lived a young girl named Astrid. With hair as golden as the summer wheat and eyes as blue as the fjord, Astrid had always felt a special connection to the ocean. One misty morning, as she walked along the pebbled shore, Astrid heard something unusual. It wasn't the typical crash of waves or cry of seagulls, but a soft melodic whisper carried on the salty breeze. "Hello?" Astrid called out, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is someone there?" The whisper came again, clearer this time. "Astrid, listen closely." Startled, Astrid looked around but saw no one. Realization dawned on her. The voice was coming from the sea itself. Her heart raced with excitement and a touch of fear. "I can hear you," she said to the waves. "But how is this possible?" The sea's response was gentle. "You have the gift, young one. A heart open to the wisdom of the waters. Listen, for we have much to share." From that day forward, Astrid spent every spare moment by the shore, learning the language of the waves. The villagers began to notice the change in her, how she seemed to glow with an inner light and spoke with a wisdom beyond her years. One evening, as Astrid's family sat around the hearth, her father Eric asked, "Astrid, my dear, what has come over you these past weeks? You seem different." Astrid smiled, her eyes twinkling in the firelight. "Father, would you believe me if I told you I could speak with the sea?" Her mother Ingrid laughed softly. "Oh, Astrid, what an imagination you have." But Eric saw the seriousness in his daughter's eyes. "Tell me more, child." Astrid took a deep breath and shared her secret. As she spoke of the sea's whispers and the knowledge it had imparted, her parents' expressions changed from disbelief to wonder. "The sea. It warns of a great storm coming," Astrid concluded. "One that could threaten our village if we're not prepared." Eric's brow furrowed with concern. "Are you certain, Astrid? This is no small matter." Astrid nodded solemnly. "I am, Father. The waves have never led me astray." The next day, Eric called a meeting of the village elders. Astrid stood before them, her voice clear and confident as she relayed the sea's warning. Elder Bjorn, his beard as white as sea foam, spoke first. "How can we trust the words of a child who claims to speak with the ocean?" Astrid met his gaze steadily. "I don't ask for your trust, Elder Bjorn. I only ask that you listen and prepare. The sea cares not whether you believe, but it would see us safe." Her words struck a chord with many. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. In the days that followed, the village came together to prepare. They reinforced their homes, secured their boats, and stored extra provisions. Some still doubted, but most were moved by Astrid's unwavering conviction. When the storm finally broke upon Kattegat, it was more fierce than any in living memory. Waves crashed against the shore, winds howled through the village, and rain fell in sheets. But thanks to their preparations, the people of Kattegat weathered the tempest safely. As the storm subsided and the sun broke through the clouds, the villagers emerged to find their homes standing and their loved ones safe. Astrid stood on the shore, tears of relief and joy mingling with the retreating raindrops on her cheeks. Elder Bjorn approached her, his eyes soft with newfound respect. "Thank you, Astrid. Your gift has saved us all." Astrid smiled and turned her gaze to the calming sea. "It wasn't just me, Elder. It was all of us working together. And it was the sea, sharing its wisdom with those willing to listen." From that day forward, the people of Kattegat looked to Astrid as a bridge between their world and the mysterious realm of the ocean. And Astrid, with her heart full of the sea's whispers, continued to guide her people, ensuring that the harmony between land and water would endure for generations to come. In the northernmost reaches of the Viking lands, where summer days stretched endlessly and winter nights seemed eternal, lay the village of Kattegat. Among its weathered wooden houses and smoke-filled mead halls lived old Ivar, a man as gnarled and ancient as the twisted pines that clung to the fjord's rocky shores. As the season of the midnight sun approached, Ivar found himself visited by vivid dreams, more real than any he had experienced in his long life. Each night, as the golden sun dipped towards the horizon only to rise again, Ivar's sleep was filled with visions of the gods. One morning, as the village stirred to life under the never-setting sun, Ivar's granddaughter, Sigrid, found him sitting on a wooden bench outside his home, his rheumy eyes fixed on the distant sea. "Grandfather," Sigrid said softly, settling beside him, "you look troubled. Are you well?" Ivar turned to her, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Ah, little one, I am well, but my mind is heavy with the weight of dreams." Sigrid leaned in, her curiosity piqued. "What kind of dreams, grandfather?" Ivar's voice lowered to a whisper as if sharing a precious secret. "Dreams of the gods, child, of Odin All-Father and Thor Thunderer. They speak to me of things to come." Sigrid's eyes widened. "What do they say?" "They speak of bounty," Ivar replied, his gaze drifting back to the sea. "Of fish teeming in waters we have not yet explored, but also of the need for unity and strength in our people." Word of Ivar's dreams spread through Kattegat like wildfire. Some dismissed them as the ramblings of an old man addled by the endless daylight. Others, remembering Ivar's past wisdom, listened with reverence. At the next gathering in the great hall, Bjorn, the village chief, called for silence. "Ivar the Elder has been granted visions by the gods themselves," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Let us hear his words." All eyes turned to Ivar as he stood, leaning heavily on his gnarled staff. "The gods have shown me a place," he began, his voice surprisingly strong. "A hidden bay, 3 days' sail to the north, where the fish run so thick you could walk across their backs." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Njal, a respected fisherman, stood up. "With all due respect, Ivar, we've fished these waters for generations. How could we have missed such a place?" Ivar smiled patiently. "The gods reveal what they will, when they will, Njal. They speak of it now because now is when we need it most." Astrid, the village's young healer, spoke next. "You mentioned unity and strength, Ivar. What did you mean?" "The gods showed me storm clouds on the horizon," Ivar replied, his expression grave. "Not just of weather, but of challenges to come. We must stand together, trust in each other, if we are to thrive." The hall fell silent as his words sank in. Finally Bjorn stood again. "Who among us will sail with Ivar to find this blessed fishing ground?" Hands raised throughout the hall, faces set with determination. Among them was Sigrid, her young face shining with pride for her grandfather. 3 days later, a small fleet of fishing boats set out under the never-setting sun, with Ivar at the lead. True to his vision, they discovered a hidden bay teeming with fish like none had ever seen. The boats returned to Kattegat laden with a catch that would see them through the hardest of winters. But the true blessing was not just in the bounty of fish. As the village worked together to preserve their catch, a new sense of unity blossomed. Old grudges were set aside, new friendships forged in the shared labor. As the season of midnight sun began to wane, Ivar sat once again outside his home, Sigrid by his side. "You've brought great fortune to our people, grandfather," she said, squeezing his gnarled hand. Ivar shook his head, smiling. "No, child. The gods brought the fortune. I was merely the vessel for their message. The true blessing is in how our people have come together." Sigrid nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. "And that unity will see us through whatever storms are coming." "Aye," Ivar agreed, his eyes twinkling. "That it will, little one. That it will." As the first stars of the season twinkled to life in the darkening sky, Kattegat settled into a peace it had not known in many years. And old Ivar, blessed by the gods with visions that had transformed his village, closed his eyes and dreamed once more of the greatness that lay ahead for his people. In the heart of Kattegat, where the scent of salt and pine mingled in the crisp air, lived Torsten, a gentle giant of a man with hands as large as shield bosses and a heart to match. Despite his imposing stature, Torsten was known throughout the village for his tender nature, especially with children. One misty morning, as Torsten tended to his small plot of land on the outskirts of the village, his spade struck something hard beneath the soil. Curious, he knelt down and began to dig with his massive hands, eventually unearthing a smooth, oval stone covered in ancient runes. "By Odin's eye," Torsten whispered, carefully lifting the runestone. "What secrets do you hold?" As he cradled the stone, a soft, almost imperceptible hum emanated from it, sending a shiver down his spine. Unsure of what to do, Torsten decided to seek counsel from the village elder Astrid. Astrid's eyes widened as Torsten placed the runestone before her. "Where did you find this, Torsten?" "In my field, just this morning," he replied. It seems to be singing, Astrid. Can you hear it?" The old woman leaned closer, her ear nearly touching the stone. After a moment, she nodded slowly. I hear it. A faint melody, like a mother's lullaby." As night fell, Torsten couldn't bring himself to part with the runestone. He placed it on a shelf in his small home and settled into bed. As he drifted off to sleep, the stone's soft humming grew slightly louder, weaving a soothing melody through the air. The next morning, Torsten was awakened by a knock at his door. He opened it to find his neighbor, Ingrid, looking both excited and bewildered. "Torsten," she exclaimed, "you won't believe it. For the first time in months, my little Eric slept through the night without a single nightmare." Torsten's brow furrowed. "That's wonderful, Ingrid, but why are you telling me?" Ingrid laughed. "Because, dear Torsten, I heard the most beautiful lullaby coming from your home last night. It was so soothing, it put my entire family to sleep." As word spread through Kattegat, more and more villagers reported the same phenomenon. Children who once fought sleep now went to bed eagerly, and even the most troubled adults found peaceful rest. Curious about the stone's power, Torsten decided to bring it to the village's great hall one evening. As families gathered for the communal meal, he placed the runestone on a central table. Bjorn, the village chieftain, approached Torsten with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Torsten, my friend, what is this stone that has our village so enchanted?" Torsten shrugged his massive shoulders. "I'm not entirely sure, Bjorn, but it seems to bring peace to all who hear its song." As if on cue, the runestone's melody grew stronger, filling the hall with its gentle tune. Children stopped their play, turning to listen with wonder-filled eyes. Adults paused in their conversations, tension visibly leaving their bodies. Little Freya, no more than 5 winters old, tugged at Torsten's tunic. "Mr. Torsten," she said, her voice filled with awe, "the stone is singing about our village, about how brave and strong we are and how we take care of each other." Torsten knelt down beside her, smiling softly. "Is that what you hear, little one?" Freya nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, and it says that as long as we remember to love each other, we'll always be safe and happy." The gentle giant looked around the hall, seeing the impact of the stone's lullaby on his fellow villagers. Families drew closer together. Old rivals clasped hands in friendship, and a sense of unity settled over Kattegat like a warm blanket. From that night forward, the runestone became a cherished part of village life. Each evening, Torsten would bring it to the great hall, where its lullaby would soothe the community into peaceful slumber. Children grew up stronger and more confident. Adults found respite from their daily toils, and the bonds between villagers grew ever tighter. Years later, as Torsten's hair turned gray and his steps grew slower, he often reflected on the blessing the runestone had brought to Kattegat. One evening, as he sat by the fire with his granddaughter on his knee, she asked, "Grandfather, why does the stone sing only for our village?" Torsten smiled, his eyes twinkling in the firelight. "Ah, little one, that's the true magic of it. The stone doesn't create the lullaby, it merely helps us hear the song that's always been in our hearts. The melody of compassion, unity, and love that makes Kattegat special." As the runestone's lullaby filled the air once more, Torsten closed his eyes, grateful for the harmony it had brought to his beloved home. In Kattegat, where the gentle giant had unearthed a singing stone, the nights were always peaceful, and the days were filled with the warmth of a community bound together by an ancient melody and the timeless power of love. In the coastal village of Kattegat, where the sky met the sea in a breathtaking embrace, lived a young shield maiden named Freya. With fiery red hair and eyes as green as the aurora that often painted the night sky, Freya had always felt a special connection to the celestial lights that danced above their Norse homeland. One crisp autumn evening, as the village gathered in the great hall to discuss the coming winter, an argument broke out between two prominent families over fishing rights. The heated words echoed through the wooden structure, threatening to tear apart the fabric of their close-knit community. Amidst the chaos, Freya slipped outside, seeking solace in the night air. As she gazed upward, the sky erupted in a spectacular display of green and purple lights, swirling and pulsating with an otherworldly energy. "Great Odin?" Freya whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "What are you trying to tell us?" As if in response, the lights shifted, forming patterns that seemed to speak directly to Freya's heart. She watched, transfixed, as images of unity, cooperation, and shared prosperity danced across the heavens. Suddenly, a gruff voice broke her reverie. "What are you doing out here, girl? The meeting's not over." Freya turned to see Eric, one of the village elders, standing behind her. His face was etched with the lines of the ongoing dispute. "Elder Eric," Freya said, her voice filled with excitement. "The gods are speaking to us through the lights. They're showing us a way to resolve the conflict." Eric's eyebrows rose skeptically. "And what do these lights tell you, young Freya?" Freya pointed to the sky, where the aurora was weaving intricate patterns. "See how the green and purple intertwine? They're separate but working together to create something beautiful, just as our families must do." Eric squinted at the sky, his expression softening slightly. "Go on," he urged. Encouraged, Freya continued, "The lights show abundance when they're in harmony. I believe if we work together, sharing the fishing grounds fairly, there will be enough for all." Eric stroked his beard thoughtfully. "You have a keen eye, Freya. Perhaps there's wisdom in those lights after all." Together they returned to the great hall. The argument was still raging, voices raised in anger and frustration. "Silence!" Eric's voice boomed across the room. All eyes turned to him and Freya. "This young shield maiden has seen a sign from the gods themselves. We would do well to listen." Freya stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Friends, families of Kattegat, the northern lights dance for us tonight with a message of unity." She described what she had seen, painting a vivid picture of cooperation and shared prosperity. As she spoke, a hush fell over the crowd. Astrid, the matriarch of one of the feuding families, was the first to speak. "And how do we know this is truly a sign from the gods and not just the fanciful imagination of a young girl?" Freya met Astrid's gaze steadily. "I invite you all to come outside and see for yourselves. The lights still dance in the sky." The villagers filed out of the hall, gasping in awe as they beheld the spectacular aurora. Freya pointed out the patterns she had seen, and to her amazement, others began to see them too. Bjorn, the leader of the other family in the dispute, turned to Astrid. "Perhaps we have been foolish, fighting over what the gods have provided for all of us." Astrid nodded slowly. "Aye, perhaps we have. What if we were to divide the fishing grounds not by family but by seasons? Each family could have primary rights at different times of the year." As the two former rivals began to discuss the idea, a sense of relief washed over the gathered villagers. The northern lights above seemed to pulse with approval. their dance growing even more vibrant. In the days that followed, Freya's interpretation of the aurora became a turning point for Kattegat. The fishing dispute was resolved amicably, with a new system that benefited all. But more than that, the village gained a new appreciation for the wisdom that could be found in the natural world around them. Freya's gift for reading the lights became well known, and villagers often sought her counsel on nights when the aurora graced the sky. She helped resolve disputes, guided important decisions, and brought a sense of divine connection to the community. One evening, as Freya stood on the cliffs overlooking the sea, Eric approached her again. "You've brought great change to our village, Freya," he said, his voice warm with pride. Freya smiled, her eyes reflecting the dancing lights above. "It wasn't me, Elder Eric. It was always there in our hearts. The lights just helped us see it." Eric nodded sagely. "And that, young one, is the greatest wisdom of all, to see the truth that lies within us all." As they stood together, watching the northern lights paint the sky with messages of hope and unity, Freya felt a deep sense of peace. In Kattegat, where the celestial dance of the aurora borealis had once been merely a beautiful sight, it now served as a brilliant reminder of the harmony that could be achieved when people opened their hearts to the wisdom of the world around them. The village of Kattegat had seen its share of visitors, but none quite like the skald who arrived on a misty autumn morning. He appeared as if from nowhere, a tall figure wrapped in a travel-worn cloak, a harp slung across his back. The villagers watched with curiosity as he made his way to the great hall, his footsteps leaving no trace in the damp earth. Bjorn, the village chieftain, met the stranger at the hall's entrance. "Welcome, traveler. What brings you to our shores?" The skald pushed back his hood, revealing a face that seemed both young and ancient at once. His eyes sparkled with an otherworldly light as he spoke. "I am Alric, a wanderer of worlds and weaver of tales. I've come to share stories that have long been forgotten." Bjorn's brow furrowed. "Forgotten tales? Of what do you speak?" Alric smiled mysteriously. "Of your own history, good chieftain. The legends of your ancestors that time has obscured." Word of the skald's arrival spread quickly through Kattegat. That evening, the great hall was packed with villagers eager to hear what Alric had to say. As the fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls, the skald took his place at the center of the room. His fingers brushed the strings of his harp, producing a melody that seemed to echo from the depths of time itself. As he began to speak, his voice resonated with power and ancient wisdom. "Listen, people of Kattegat, to the tale of your foremother, Astrid the Valiant," Alric began. "In an age when the world was younger and the gods walked among us, Astrid led your people across stormy seas to this very shore." As Alric's tale unfolded, the villagers found themselves transported. They could almost see Astrid standing at the prow of her longship, her golden hair whipping in the wind as she guided her people to their new home. Ingrid, the village's eldest member, gasped softly. "My grandmother used to whisper of Astrid, but I thought it merely a child's fancy." Alric's eyes met hers. "The stories live in your blood, good Ingrid. They were never truly forgotten, only sleeping." Throughout the night, Alric shared tale after tale of great battles and tender loves, of trials overcome and lessons learned. With each story, the villagers felt a stirring in their hearts, a connection to their past growing stronger. Young Eric, his eyes wide with wonder, asked, "But how do you know these stories, Alric? You're not from our village." Alric's smile was gentle. "The tales of your people are written in the wind and waves, young one. For those who know how to listen, they're as clear as the stars in the sky." As dawn approached, Alric's voice grew soft. "Remember, people of Kattegat, the strength that flows in your veins. You are the children of Astrid the Valiant, of Bjorn Ironside, of countless heroes whose names may have been lost, but whose spirit lives on in you." A hush fell over the hall as his words sank in. Then, slowly, conversations began to buzz. Villagers turned to one another, sharing fragments of memories passed down through generations, piecing together their shared history. Bjorn approached Alrik, his eyes misty with emotion. "You've given us a great gift, Wanderer. How can we repay you?" Alrik shook his head. "The gift was always yours. Chieftain, I merely helped you unwrap it. My payment is seeing the light of recognition in your eyes, the pride in your bearing as you reclaim your heritage." As the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Alrik prepared to take his leave. The villagers gathered to bid him farewell, each feeling forever changed by the night's revelations. Little Freya tugged at Alrik's cloak. "Will you come back and tell us more stories?" Alrik knelt down, meeting her gaze. "The stories live within you now, little one. Share them, pass them on, and I'll always be here in spirit." With a final strum of his harp, Alrik turned and walked away, seeming to fade into the morning mist. But his presence lingered in Kattegat, in the newfound strength and unity of its people. In the days that followed, the village buzzed with energy. Elders shared long-forgotten tales with eager youth. Family histories were recounted with pride, and a sense of shared purpose filled the air. Bjorn, watching his people with satisfaction, murmured to himself, "We've been given a second chance to know ourselves. This time, we won't forget." And so, in the coastal village of Kattegat, where a wandering skald had awakened sleeping memories, the people faced the future with renewed vigor, their hearts beating in time with the ancient rhythms of their forebears' tales. The winter that descended upon Kattegat was unlike any in living memory. Snow piled high against longhouses, and the fjord froze solid, trapping fishing boats in its icy grip. As the villagers huddled around meager fires, young Leif, known for his kind heart and curious nature, ventured out into the frigid wilderness. Leif trudged through the deep snow, his fur-lined boots crunching with each step. The wind howled around him, carrying whispers of an ancient sorrow. As he crested a hill, he gasped at the sight before him. A massive figure, easily thrice the height of the tallest Viking, sat hunched on a frozen boulder, great icy tears streaming down its blue-tinged face. "By the gods," Leif whispered, his breath visible in the freezing air. "A frost giant." The creature's head snapped up, its eyes like frozen lakes fixing upon Leif. "A mortal dares approach Thorim, last of the frost giants," its voice boomed, shaking snow from nearby trees. Leif's heart raced, but he stood his ground. I heard weeping. Are you in pain, great Thorim?" Surprise flickered across the giant's face, softening its fearsome features. "You ask after my well-being, tiny one? How unexpected." Leif took a tentative step forward. "My name is Leif, and I would listen if you wished to share your sorrow." Thorim regarded the young Viking for a long moment before sighing, a gust of frigid air washing over Leif. "Very well, life of Kattegat. I weep for my kin long gone from this world. I weep for the age of ice and snow retreating before the warmth of your kind's fires. I weep, for I am alone." Leif's heart ached at the giant's words. "But surely, great Thorim, you needn't be alone. Our village may fear you, but I would be honored to call you friend." Thorim's laughter rumbled like an avalanche. "Friend? To a frost giant? You are either very brave or very foolish, young Leif." "Perhaps a bit of both," Leif grinned. "But tell me, Thorim, why bring such a harsh winter to our lands?" The giant's expression grew somber. "It was not my intention. My sorrow manifests as cold and ice. The more I grieve, the harsher the winter becomes." Leif's mind raced. Then perhaps if we could ease your loneliness, the winter might relent? Over the next few days, Leif visited Thorim regularly, bringing tales of village life and listening to the giant's ancient stories. Gradually, the bitter wind lessened and the thick clouds began to part. Word of Leif's unusual friendship spread through Kattegat. Many were fearful, but others were intrigued. Astrid, the village elder, approached Leif one evening. Tell me, young one, of this frost giant you've befriended. Leif's eyes lit up. Oh, Elder Astrid, Thorim is wonderful. He knows so much about the old ways, about the land itself. And he's not cruel or evil, just sad and alone. Astrid nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps it's time we met this Thorim ourselves. The next day, a small group from the village accompanied Leif to Thorim's hill. The frost giant tensed at their approach, but Leif's reassuring smile eased his concern. People of Kattegat, Thorim's voice rumbled. Your young Leif has shown me great kindness. I would extend the same to you if you'll accept it. Bjorn, the village chief, stepped forward. We've lived in fear of frost giants for generations, Thorim, but Leif has taught us that perhaps there's more to your kind than our stories tell. As the villagers and the frost giant conversed, sharing tales and finding common ground, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in weeks. The harsh winter began to recede, replaced by a more manageable cold. In the days that followed, Thorim became a familiar sight near Kattegat. He helped clear snow from the village paths, used his immense strength to free the trapped fishing boats, and shared his vast knowledge of the land with the curious villagers. One evening, as Leif sat with Thorim watching the aurora dance across the sky, the frost giant spoke softly. Thank you, young friend. Your kindness has melted more than just the ice around us. Leif smiled up at his enormous companion. And your friendship has taught us all that even in the coldest heart, warmth can be found. As word spread of Kattegat's unusual alliance, other villages sought to learn from them. The harsh winter that had threatened to destroy them instead became the catalyst for a new era of understanding between humans and the ancient beings of the land. Years later, Leif, now a respected elder himself, would tell wide-eyed children the tale of the winter when Kattegat befriended a frost giant, and in the distance, Thorim's gentle laughter would rumble like far-off thunder, a reminder of the friendship that had changed them all. In the village of Kattegat, where the sea met the land and ancient forests stood sentinel, lived Helga, a wise woman known for her deep connection to nature. With hair as silver as moonlight and eyes as green as spring leaves, Helga had always felt a special bond with the towering trees that surrounded their settlement. One misty morning, as Helga gathered herbs at the forest's edge, she heard something unusual, a soft rustling whisper that seemed to come from the trees themselves. Hello? Helga called softly, her weathered hand resting on the bark of an old oak. Is someone there? The whisper came again, clearer this time. Helga, listen closely. Startled, Helga looked around but saw no one. Realization dawned on her. The voice was coming from the tree itself. Her heart raced with excitement and a touch of fear. I can hear you, she said to the oak, but how is this possible? The tree's response was gentle, its leaves rustling softly. You have always listened, Helga. Now we can finally speak. The forest has much to share. From that day forward, Helga spent every spare moment in the woods, learning the language of the trees. She discovered that each species had its own voice. The oak spoke with deep, measured tones, while the birches whispered quick, cheerful messages. As weeks passed, the villagers began to notice a change in Helga. She spoke with newfound wisdom about the land and seemed to predict weather patterns with uncanny accuracy. One evening, as the village gathered in the great hall, Bjorn, the chieftain, approached Helga. Wise one, he said, his voice tinged with concern. The people speak of your strange new knowledge. Some fear you've been bewitched by the forest spirits. Helga smiled softly. No bewitchment, good Bjorn. The forest has simply chosen to share its wisdom with us. Bjorn's brow furrowed. Share its wisdom? Helga, trees cannot speak. Ah, but they can in their own way, Helga replied. Come with me tomorrow at dawn, and I will show you. The next morning, Helga led Bjorn and a group of curious villagers into the forest. As they reached a clearing, she placed her hand on a massive ash tree. Listen, she instructed. Open your hearts and minds to the voice of the forest. At first, the villagers heard nothing but the normal sounds of the woods. But as they stood in silence, concentrating, a few began to pick up faint whispers on the breeze. Young Eric, his eyes wide with wonder, was the first to speak. I think I hear something. The ash. It's warning about a dry summer ahead. Astrid, the village's best farmer, gasped. Yes, and the birch is suggesting we plant our crops closer to the stream this year. As more villagers began to hear the tree's messages, excitement rippled through the group. Bjorn turned to Helga, awe evident in his face. This is incredible, Helga. But why have the trees chosen to speak to us now? Helga's eyes twinkled. They've always been speaking, Bjorn. We're simply learning to listen. The forest wishes to help us live in harmony with the land. In the days that followed, guided by Helga and the forest's wisdom, the village of Kattegat began to change. They adjusted their farming practices, learning to work with the land rather than against it. They discovered new medicinal herbs and more sustainable ways to harvest timber. One evening, as Helga sat by the forest's edge, Bjorn joined her. You've brought great changes to our village, Helga, he said, his voice filled with gratitude. Helga smiled, her gaze sweeping over the trees. The forest has always been our silent guardian, Bjorn. Now it's our partner in ensuring a prosperous future. As word spread of Kattegat's harmony with the forest, other villages sought to learn their secrets. Helga began teaching others to listen to the trees, spreading the ancient wisdom throughout the Norse lands. Years passed and Kattegat flourished. The once feared forest became a place of learning and reverence. Children grew up understanding the delicate balance of nature, and the village's reputation for sustainable living spread far and wide. On her last day, as Helga felt her life ebbing away, she asked to be taken into the heart of the forest. As she leaned against her beloved oak, surrounded by her people, the trees began to whisper a gentle lullaby. "Thank you, old friends," Helga murmured, a peaceful smile on her face. "Guide them well." As Helga's spirit departed, the villagers swore they could hear the forest weeping, a soft, rustling lament that echoed through the woods. But mingled with the sorrow was a promise, carried on the wind. The wisdom of the whispering forest would forever be a part of Kattegat, guiding and protecting them for generations to come. From that day forward, the people of Kattegat honored Helga's legacy by continuing to listen to the forest's whispers, ensuring that the harmony between humans and nature would endure for ages to come. In the heart of Kattegat, where the smell of salt and pine intermingled with the smoke of hearth fires, lived young Rollo. With unruly dark hair and eyes that seemed to look beyond the visible world, Rollo had always been different from the other children. His nights were filled with vivid dreams that left him wide-eyed and breathless come morning. At first, his parents dismissed his excited recountings as mere childish fantasies, but as weeks turned to months, and Rollo's dreams began to mirror events in the village with uncanny accuracy, whispers began to spread. One crisp autumn morning, Rollo burst into the village square, his voice high with urgency. "The ice bear," he cried. "It comes from the north, hungry and fierce." The villagers paused in their daily tasks, exchanging bemused glances. Bjorn, the village chieftain, approached the boy with a patient smile. "Now, Rollo, what's all this about an ice bear? We haven't seen one of those in these parts for generations." Rollo's eyes were wide and earnest. "But I saw it, Chieftain Bjorn. In my dream, it came crashing through the trees, its fur stained with blood. We must prepare." Bjorn patted the boy's shoulder. "That's quite an imagination you have, lad. But we can't go chasing after every dream, can we?" As Bjorn turned away, Astrid, the village elder, fixed Rollo with a keen gaze. "Tell me more about this dream, child," she said, her voice low and intent. Over the next few days, most of the village forgot about Rollo's warning, but Astrid insisted on doubling the watch and reinforcing the village's defenses, much to the annoyance of some of the other elders. "You're giving too much credence to a child's nightmare, Astrid," grumbled Eric, one of the senior hunters. Astrid's reply was calm but firm. There's often wisdom in dreams, Eric. We'd be fools to ignore them entirely. As the week drew to a close, a bone-chilling roar echoed through the village. Panic erupted as a massive ice bear, lean and desperate from the early winter, burst from the forest's edge. "To arms!" Bjorn's voice boomed across the square. Thanks to Astrid's preparations, the village was ready. After a fierce battle, they managed to drive the bear away without any casualties. In the aftermath, Bjorn approached Rollo, who stood trembling but proud. "It seems we owe you an apology, young one," the chieftain said, his voice humbled. "Your dream saved our village." From that day forward, Rollo's dreams became a valued part of village life. Each morning he would recount his visions to Astrid and Bjorn, who would interpret them and prepare accordingly. Some dreams were straightforward, storms approaching, shoals of fish moving into the fjord. Others were more cryptic, requiring careful interpretation. One misty morning, Rollo burst into the great hall, his face pale. "I dreamed of golden leaves falling from a silver tree," he gasped, and each leaf turned to ash as it touched the ground. The elders exchanged worried glances. Astrid leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Tell us more, Rollo. What else did you see?" As Rollo described his dream in detail, the village leaders debated its meaning. Finally, Bjorn spoke. "Could it be a warning of fire? Perhaps we should clear the brush around the village just in case." His suggestion proved wise when, weeks later, a lightning strike ignited the forest. Thanks to the cleared area, Kattegat was spared from the flames. As the years passed, Rollo's gift only grew stronger. His dreams guided the village through harsh winters, bountiful harvests, and even raids from rival clans. But the weight of his visions often left him exhausted and isolated. One evening, as Rollo sat alone by the shore, Astrid joined him. "Your gift is a heavy burden, child," she said softly. Rollo nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Sometimes I wish I could dream like everyone else, Astrid. Just meaningless shadows and fragments." Astrid placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Your dreams may set you apart, Rollo, but they also bind you to this village in the most profound way. You are our seer, our guide through the mists of time." Rollo managed a small smile. "I just hope I'm always able to interpret them correctly. The responsibility is overwhelming at times." "That's why you're not alone," Astrid reminded him. "We're here to help you understand and act on your visions. Remember, even the gods don't bear their burdens alone." As night fell and the stars emerged, painting the sky with ancient constellations, Rollo felt a sense of peace settle over him. He may walk a lonely path, but it was one that kept his people safe and prosperous. In the years that followed, the fame of Kattegat's dreamer spread far and wide. Other villages sought alliances, hoping to benefit from Rollo's prophetic visions. And though challenges still came, the people of Kattegat faced them with confidence, knowing that in the realm of dreams, they had a vigilant guardian, forever watching over their future. In the village of Kattegat, where the mountains embraced the sea, lived a young herbalist named Sigrid. With hair as dark as raven's wings and eyes the color of moss, Sigrid had always been more comfortable among her plants than with people. Her shy nature and unusual affinity for herbs had often set her apart from the other villagers. As winter's grip began to loosen, a mysterious illness swept through Kattegat. It started with a few cases, fatigue, fever, and a strange blue tinge to the skin. Within days, half the village was bedridden. Bjorn, the village chieftain, called a meeting in the great hall. "Our people are dying," he announced, his voice grave, "and our traditional medicines seem powerless against this sickness." Sigrid, standing in the shadows, felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She knew she should speak up, but fear held her back. It was Astrid, the village elder, who noticed her discomfort. "Sigrid?" Astrid called gently. "You have a gift with herbs. Have you any insights?" All eyes turned to Sigrid, who felt her face flush hot. I'm not sure," she stammered. "But I've been having strange dreams of a hidden fjord. The water's there. They glow with an unearthly light." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Eric, a respected warrior, scoffed. "Dreams in glowing water? We need real solutions, not fairy tales." Bjorn held up a hand for silence. "In times like these, we must consider all possibilities. Sigrid, would you recognize this fjord if you saw it?" Sigrid nodded, finding courage in the chieftain's trust. "I believe so. It's nestled between two peaks that look like a wolf's ears." "I know the place," growled Gunnar, an old hunter. "It's a day's journey north, through treacherous terrain. Few have ventured there and returned." Bjorn's eyes narrowed in thought. "Then we shall mount an expedition. Sigrid, you will lead it, along with Gunnar and a small team." As dawn broke the next day, Sigrid found herself at the head of a small group, venturing into the wilderness. Her heart raced with a mixture of fear and excitement. The journey was arduous. Steep cliffs, icy streams, and dense forests challenged them at every turn. As night fell, they made camp in a sheltered valley. "We're fools to follow a girl's dream," Eric muttered, warming his hands by the fire. Gunnar's response was gruff but kind. "Aye, perhaps, but what other hope do we have?" Sigrid, overhearing, felt doubt gnaw at her. What if she was wrong? What if she was leading them on a wild goose chase while more villagers fell ill? As if sensing her turmoil, Astrid, who had insisted on joining despite her age, sat beside her. "Faith, child," she said softly, "in yourself and in the gods who send us visions when we need them most." The next day, as the sun reached its zenith, they crested a ridge and gasped. There, nestled between two peaks that indeed resembled a wolf's ears, lay a hidden fjord. Its waters shimmered with an otherworldly blue-green light. "By the gods," breathed Gunnar. The lass was right. Sigrid approached the water's edge, her heart pounding. As she knelt and dipped her hands into the fjord, she felt a surge of energy course through her body. The water was warm despite the chill in the air, and seemed to pulse with life. "Quick," she called to the others. "We need to collect as much of this water as we can carry." As they filled their water skins and jars, Sigrid noticed plants growing along the shore that she had never seen before. Acting on instinct, she carefully harvested samples, knowing they might hold additional healing properties. The return journey was filled with a sense of urgent hope. When they finally reached Kattegat, they found the situation had worsened. More than 2/3 of the village now lay ill. Without hesitation, Sigrid began administering the glowing water to the sick. She also brewed teas from the strange plants she had gathered, guided by an intuition she couldn't explain. To everyone's amazement, the effects were almost immediate. Within hours, fevers broke and the blue tinge began to fade from the villagers' skin. By the following dawn, most of the sick were on their feet again, weak but recovering. In the Great Hall, Bjorn raised a horn of mead to Sigrid. "You have saved our people," he declared. "Your courage and wisdom will be remembered for generations to come." Sigrid, unused to such attention, felt her face grow hot. "It wasn't just me," she said softly. "It was all of us, working together. And perhaps the gods themselves guided us." In the days that followed, Sigrid led expeditions back to the healing fjord, carefully harvesting its waters and plants to replenish the village's stores. She also began teaching others her newfound knowledge, ensuring that the healing wisdom would not be lost. The once shy herbalist found herself at the center of village life, respected and sought after for her knowledge. Yet she never forgot the lesson of the healing fjord, that true strength comes from working in harmony with nature and with each other. As years passed, the tale of Sigrid and the healing fjord became legend, a reminder to all in Kattegat that sometimes the greatest discoveries come from listening to the quiet voices within and daring to venture into the unknown. The coastal village of Kattegat had weathered many storms, both literal and figurative, but nothing had prepared them for the day the runestone was unearthed. It happened during the construction of a new longhouse, when Gunnar's axe struck something hard beneath the soil. "By Thor's hammer!" Gunnar exclaimed, brushing away the dirt to reveal an intricately carved stone. "Bjorn, come quickly!" Bjorn, the village chieftain, hurried over, his eyes widening at the sight. A rune stone, and one I've never seen before. Word spread quickly, and soon the entire village had gathered around the mysterious find. The runes etched into its surface were ancient and complex, unlike anything they had seen before. Young Bjorn, namesake of the chieftain and known for his quick mind, pushed his way to the front of the crowd. His eyes scanned the symbols, brow furrowed in concentration. "Can you read it, boy?" asked Eric, the village's most respected warrior. Bjorn shook his head slowly. "Not yet. These runes are different. I'll need time to decipher them." As Bjorn began his work, whispers of unease spread through Kattegat. Some saw the runestone as a blessing from the gods, while others feared it was a curse. Days passed, and Bjorn labored tirelessly over the stone. The village waited with bated breath, tension growing with each passing hour. Rumors began to circulate, each more frightening than the last. "I heard it foretells a great plague," muttered Astrid, the village healer, as she gathered herbs in the market. "Nonsense," retorted Gunnar. "It clearly warns of an impending attack. We should fortify our defenses." As fear gripped the village, old rivalries resurfaces and new suspicions arose. Neighbors who had once shared mead now eyed each other warily across the street. Bjorn, aware of the growing discord, redoubled his efforts. He consulted ancient texts, sought counsel from the elders, and even journeyed to neighboring villages to speak with their rune masters. Finally, after nearly a fortnight, Bjorn called the village together. The air was thick with anticipation as he stood before them, the runestone at his feet. "People of Kattegat," he began, his young voice steady and clear. "I have deciphered the runes, and I now know their true meaning." A hush fell over the crowd. Bjorn took a deep breath and continued. "This stone does not bring a curse, nor does it foretell doom. Instead, it brings a warning and a gift." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The runes speak of a great flood, one that will come with the spring thaw, but they also tell us how to survive it." Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Chieftain Bjorn stepped forward. "Explain, young one. What must we do?" The younger Bjorn pointed to specific runes on the stone. "These symbols speak of building our homes on higher ground, of constructing strong sea walls, and of storing food and fresh water. If we heed this advice, we will not only survive but thrive." Relief washed over the villagers, quickly followed by a sense of purpose. Chieftain Bjorn clapped the young man on the shoulder. "You've done well, namesake. Now let us put this knowledge to use." In the weeks that followed, Kattegat was a hive of activity. Homes were relocated to higher ground, sturdy sea walls were erected, and storehouses were filled with provisions. The work was hard, but it brought the village together, healing the rifts that fear had created. As the first signs of spring appeared, so too did the flood. Water rose higher than anyone had ever seen. But thanks to their preparations, Kattegat stood firm. From the safety of their elevated homes, the villagers watched as the waters swirled below, grateful for the ancient warning that had saved them. When the flood finally receded, Kattegat found itself uniquely positioned. While other villages had been devastated, they were intact and well supplied. They were able to offer aid to their neighbors, forging new alliances and trade relationships. One evening, as the village celebrated their survival and newfound prosperity, young Bjorn stood before the runestone, now displayed prominently in the center of the village. Astrid approached him, a respectful smile on her face. "You saved us all, Bjorn. How did you manage to unlock the stone's secrets when even our eldest scholars were baffled?" Bjorn turned to her, his eyes twinkling. "I listened, Astrid, not just to the words of our elders or the texts of our ancestors, but to the stone itself. These runes, they speak to those who have the patience to truly hear them." Chieftain Bjorn, overhearing, nodded approvingly. And that, young namesake, is the mark of a true leader. You've not only saved our village, but taught us all a valuable lesson. Sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from stepping back, calming our fears, and listening to the whispers of the past. As night fell and the stars emerged, the people of Kattegat gathered around their fires, sharing tales of their triumph over adversity. The runestone stood silent witness to their celebrations, its ancient wisdom now a living part of their legacy. From that day forward, Kattegat flourished, its people forever mindful of the balance between respecting the past and preparing for the future. And young Bjorn, the boy who had unlocked the runestone's secrets, grew to become a leader as wise and beloved as his namesake, guiding Kattegat into a new era of prosperity and harmony.